Welcome to Raging Bullets, episode 491, a pop culture and whatnot special. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot segment, and the Duke of You Know. On this episode, we're joined by Brian Lau as he discusses his Kickstarter for Staunch Ambition. We get really spoilery on issue 1, and we have an opportunity to talk with Brian about the nature and the genesis of a Kickstarter, the story contents of the first issue to really kind of give people an idea of what the world of Staunch Ambition is like, and hopefully give you some incentive to join in to support the Kickstarter for issue 2. Please take a look at, in the show notes, the links to the issue 2 Kickstarter, and please consider supporting Staunch Ambition. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Sponsoring us this episode once again is, of course, as always, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I know Jim always shouts out the bundles, and I'm certainly going to carry on that tradition. They are offering 5 different DC Universe Rebirth bundles, and they're all 50% off. Some of them involve variant covers. They're all different configurations. Please make sure to check them out to see if you can save some deals, but I mean, the 50% off deal is amazing. It's a great way for those of you that are just getting your feet wet with Rebirth and maybe just coming back to DC to be able to maintain your budget. I love when DCB Service does that. That's really important to me. Over at InStockTrades.com, I love going over to the site to see what the 50% off deals of the week are. They've got the Batgirl trade paperback Volume 1, Beyond Burnside, the Cyborg trade paperback Volume 1, The Imitation of Life. Both these are the Rebirth kickoffs. They're 50% off each, only $8.49. They have the Justice League of America Bronze Age Omnibus Hardcover Volume 1. I am really digging that DC is releasing more and more of these omnibus books. This one is also available 50% off, only $49.99. If you are missing these omnibuses and you've been wanting to collect them, catch them at this 50% off deal. They do have throughout the site, when you take a look at their latest releases, those are up to 42% off. They have them at 30% off. There's a wide variety of books from across comics that you can get amazing discounts on if you go over to InStockTrades.com. Back to DCB Service account for 1 second. When you take a look at that, link that DCBService.com account to your Comixology account, your My Digital Comics account. Shop through their portals and earn 5% of those purchases towards your DCB Service order. Please support both of those sites. They are linked, they are sister sites, and they are proud supporters of our show. Also, I do want to shout out real quick, remember to check out our show notes for links to Brian's Kickstarter. We're going to be jumping right in now and talking about Staunch Ambition. I do want to remind everyone that we are a spoiler podcast, and Jim's not here right now, so I'm going to have to do this, and I'm not going to do it as well as him, because there's that sensei flair. But I do want to remind everyone that we are going to be talking spoilery about Staunch Ambition issue number 1. If you haven't picked up the book yet, please check out the links. Go ahead and do that and join in on our discussion. If you haven't read it, but you want to get a feel for the world, that's really the point of this spoilery discussion, to let you know why you should be supporting the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter has a limited number of days, so please consider supporting it. Even if it's not your cup of tea, please shout out and spread the links to people that you know that are sci-fi fans, because it's a great book. We're big believers in it. So let's talk to Brian. I'm very excited for this opportunity. Joining us this episode is Brian Lau, one of the chief creators on Staunch Ambition. And our history with this book is very interesting. There was a Kickstarter a while back for the first issue that we got involved in because there was a variant cover done by longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II, and that was how I got to meet you, Brian. I'm really excited for the opportunity now because there's a Kickstarter out there for the issue 2, which issue 1 ends in a cliffhanger that we're going to talk about on this episode. This is very spoilery, but I'm so excited to see where the story goes next. I'm excited to talk to you about the genesis of this project. So I really thank you for your time today and for coming on, because this book's become very special to me.
Awesome, man. I'm excited also as well. I listened to several of your Freddie interviews. I'm a big Freddie fan, and when I was hitting up people to do some of these established awesome artists to do a cover for me, and Freddie said he would, I was giddy with delight, and he just nailed it. I love the cover he did, and I've been a fan of you guys as well. So I was excited to get on, and I'm loving the excitement I get from you as well. It recharges the batteries.
That's part of the fun of comics for me. It's when something new comes out, something fresh. Comics is one of those, and I think it was Neil Gaiman who was referencing it, that it is a delivery medium, not a genre. So you can really tell any kind of story within that delivery medium. And I really liked that concept because I do think it's what's best about comics. So something like this is unique. Where did Staunch Ambition come from? How did this all get started? Because it's a very interesting story. It's unique, I think, to comics. Where did this come from?
Well, there's a few origins that started a long time ago. So, I obviously as a kid I was into art. I'm an artist. Even I'm the creator of the book, but I also contribute some of the art. I'm writing it, and then I'm co-writing it because it's a lot of work. So I got some collaborators with me. But I, started out as a kid just loving art, being an artist and getting into comics. I have an older brother who's a dentist, who's a geek, big time. And back then, so he had comics laying around. So that was one of the first steps of me getting just into comics. Then in college, I took a cartooning class, and for one of the assignments, we had to do a comic book cover. So I went to college, Macomb Community College over in Michigan for graphic and commercial art, but we had to do a comic book cover. So I was like, oh, cool, this would be fun. I wasn't thinking about comics anymore. I was in college. I was too sophisticated. No, I wouldn't say that my idea was I was too sophisticated. I was just too poor maybe and just too busy with the college life. But so have you ever heard of a game called Champions?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the superhero role-playing game you're talking about?
Exactly. So we had played Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, and my brother's a big board game guy, and he has like hundreds of board games, and he's actually designing a few that maybe someday he'll do. But so we're geeks into that, and we were playing Champions, and the sheet you had where you would have just a generic character standing there, a man or a woman. And then you'd have all this stuff you'd fill out for their powers and their disadvantages. And he had some certain characters, and you could like do your own little, coloring or drawing over the top of this generic character of what the character would look like. And that was kind of the fun of it. So he did this like just simple character with these like crisscrosses going around it, like things were orbiting him. And when I was contemplating what I'm going to do for this cover for college, I was investigating stuff, and I looked at that and I thought, dude, can I use this? And he was like, yeah, sure. He's not an artist at all. He writes, and in fact, him and I were going to actually do this story back in the day, and he was going to write, and we were going to collaborate with people, and it was more superhero-ish back then. It had this kind of generic superhero story idea, and I'm young and in college. And collaborating with people back then where you're just trying to collaborate and there's no like contracts or money or everything just would never come through. And I'm glad, because back then the story, I look back on it now and I'm like, yeah, it's just kind of, it might have been cool, but it's not what it is today. So that's the backdrop of all that. I get married and I had 5 kids, and throughout all this time, this character, one of the covers on the where the character Azarus is looking down on the earth. That was that's what the design of that first cover was. But that character, I started to just come up with all these different ideas, and I just kept writing in my books and my notes these different ideas about what the story could be, and it just turned into this whole organic, as you said, this podcast would be just like this organic process into a sci-fi and something that might actually could happen in our actual future. So that's where this concept came from. And then so I decided, you know what, the story got so intriguing as I'm writing these ideas down that I was like, you know what, I got to do this. I want to find out how this all works and what happens just as much as anyone else.
So that's the fun part about it. I mean, it's getting to that point. What are some of the challenges you face? Because Kickstarters are something I'm incredibly intrigued by. I support Kickstarters for comics that I'm intrigued by and interested in, especially when I hear about them. I'm like new projects and things that will strike me as something interesting. I do it with video games. There's different technology that's been put out there that like convenience items that people have created. I've got this thing called the Mohu Reach. It's a extra way to plug in like your various cell phones and iPads and things like that with extra USB points in it. So Kickstarter's been a fun thing for me to, I think, feel like you're a community member who is supporting something that may not have otherwise been able to come to fruition. How do you get to the point that you're like ready to do a Kickstarter? Like, what was that like for you? Because this is well realized. I mean, when you read, the opening and then kick into issue 1, it's a very realized story with a lot of depth to it. So like this is something that has germinated for some time. You've got a vision for it and where it's going to go. How do you get to that point where you're like, this is ready and Kickstarter's my avenue?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm an independent creator, and this is my second Kickstarter. So my first one was a lot of overhead of research. And one of the biggest things is the Kickstarter in particular is just researching the crap out of it. You guys don't swear, or do you swear? This is a family-friendly show. So, but just researching everything from just the video alone and hours and hours of researching what kind of video and every detail to how long it should be, what should be in it, and taking notes and just research. So like, even though before that ideally you want to have your project pretty much done or a significant amount. Yes, I had issue 1 done when I started my first Kickstarter. So a lot of people don't do that. I've supported some Kickstarters that I didn't get the actual product yet. So, but the thing is, I actually did a preview issue 2 because I kind of knew coming into this as an independent creator that I want to build social media, I want to build a fan base, and then when I do a Kickstarter, which seemed at the time the best avenue to go, that I wouldn't be starting from scratch. So I paid up front out of my own pocket everything to do issue 1 and the preview issue, and I started hitting conventions. I built my website and all that. So all that pre-planning there. Obviously collaborating with artists and writers to create the preview in issue 1. And then just building the Kickstarter is, making the video and, oh my gosh, so much work. And it's a learning curve. And so listening to podcasts of people like me now that I've done a successful Kickstarter and I'm on my second one, hours of podcasts of people talking about Kickstarter marketing, listening, all this kind of stuff, which is not what I thought being a comic book creator was going to entail. I'm learning just kind of like accounting techniques. I mean, whatever. It's just all that stuff is kind of connected somehow. But so I did a lot of research, and I had my issue and my vision for the story already kind of the foundation built. So doing social media too is so important.
Yeah, I'm kind of really glad you did that preview, by the way, because for me, when I first started reading through that preview, you get that nice overview of what the world is and where, just the initial kind of quote unquote origin of what the story is going to be. But it gives you that initial intro, that initial beginnings, and it kind of gets you wanting more. And that, for me, by the time I got done with that preview, learning what the world is like and where it came from and all the craziness and whatnot, I was like, oh, okay. This is going to be a roller coaster. I want to see where this goes. So I was already a little bit excited when I got started on issue 1, just what the preview was supposed to do. Good job, man. I liked it.
Oh, thanks. One of the ideas behind the preview issues, when I read Lord of the Rings, I mean, it's like everybody talks about Lord of the Rings, but for good reason. But one of the things I realized Tolkien did, and I don't know if someone explained this to me or if I just, when I was reading it, realized, I'm sure someone had to. I mean, there's been a million books on him. But I just realized this weird thing that he did in this fictional story of building a history within their story that made this fictional story seem realer, seem legit. And so I started to think, you know what, I want to have people in my story refer to things that happened in their history, or so that's what that prologue is just kind of, it's all stuff that happened in their history, but just set you up with their past and baggage or fears or obstacles they had to overcome. So that was the kind of catalyst to build that prologue.
As we're talking about the prologue and the Kickstarter and all that, I before we jump into the book, because I'm like really chomping at the bit to start talking about the book content. You mentioned something about the Kickstarter with the fact that this is your second one, and that a lot of what you were just talking about is stuff that normally a comic book publisher would deal with. You're looking at the accounting end. You're basically running your own mini comic business to get issue 1 out. What did you learn? Because I think it's interesting for people who are doing Kickstarter. What did you learn between your first Kickstarter and the second Kickstarter? Did something click that maybe helped you make the second one easier? Because I can imagine it would be a very daunting task, especially with all the pre-planning you did for the first one. Because you're right, I've done a number of Kickstarters. I really love the concept and the community-based nature of it. But I've had ones before where I'm like, to your point, it's a few years later now and I'm still waiting on it. And it's patient for me because I know that's how Kickstarter works. It makes me appreciate all the more when you get something like Staunch Ambition, where it like came out timely. I'm like, what? This is a Kickstarter?
I've had people compliment me on that. In fact, one of the guys did fan art for me because he had received his book promptly, but it was damaged in the mail, and I sent him another one out, and he was just ecstatic and did some fan art for me. So, John Davies, and so. Anyways, one thing I want to say is thanks a lot for the compliment on the preview, though. I was worried about the preview in particular being because when I give a book out, I want someone to feel like, look, I bought this book and I got something worth my money or my time for it. And I was really concerned about that because it's, part of it's a sneak peek to issue 1 and part of it's a prologue and then some of it's behind the scenes of the creation of the book. But things I've learned, I don't know. I'll tell you one thing, though. This second Kickstarter has been a better start because of a lot of the reasons. I already have a certain fan base I've been building through comic conventions, through social media, doing podcasts. This is my first time with you guys, but we've been talking, and you supported me on the first one. And just all that stuff starts to build like a snowball. And then... so it's helped on the second one. What have I learned? I don't know, because it's had a good start, and then you always have this, like, unless you're, Neil Gaiman doing a Kickstarter, or some people who just have huge followings. The middle is just as smooth as the beginning, but typical Kickstarters have a good start, they kind of have a lull, and then at the end they might pick up. And so I'm a nervous wreck, and I'm just like rack my brain over, okay, did I cross my T's and did I dot my I's, and am I being too desperate, sending it, how to word it, I don't want to sound desperate. Hey, check my Kickstarter or I'm going to cry. Or do I sound, I want to sound confident. I believe in this book, and I get a lot of compliments on it. So I'm like, okay, well then just go that route. So it's kind of a struggle, I'll tell you. It was encouraging to have a good start and to get people sending stuff even just before. It's like, when's issue 2 coming out? And I'm like, that's kind of humbling, and new to me. So the second Kickstarter, I think I've learned some things because I have experience, obviously, but it's just as nerve-wracking because right now I'm at I think around just about 40%, just under 40%. So, and I'm halfway through the project. So it's not bad, but it's not there. So it's like, it's been a little easier and fun, but at the same time, it's still a struggle. So,
one of the things that I actually like about your Kickstarter, and I encourage more creators to do this, when you're doing follow-up issues to a previous project, in this case, issue 2 of Staunch Ambition, I really like it when Kickstarters offer a jumping-on point. Meaning, that you can get the previous material when it's possible. It's not always the case. I realize it's not always, sometimes that's a lofty goal. But I I've even to the point of sometimes that's my first exposure to a creator, and they've done multiple Kickstarters. Their Kickstarters may not be directly linked, meaning that it's a new product or a new comic concept, but they offer a bundle where it's like, hey, these are some other things that I've done if you want this tier. I really appreciate the jumping on point because I did support the first Kickstarter, very excited to support the second one, but I just ordered recently copies of issue 1 because I've got some friends of mine that aren't comic fans but are sci-fi junkies that I'm like, you know what, why didn't I give them this? And I really encourage people to do that because we're always looking for that gateway to bring people into comics. And I think when you find that book that you're like, hey, it's not superhero, which I love superhero comics. But
me too, yeah.
This is something that would appeal to a different crowd, and I think it's cool for that purpose.
Yeah, the superhero thing is tricky because I think you and I obviously love superhero comics. I mean, but it's kind of seems hard to do something really new with superheroes. It can be done, but it's when I see Kickstarters or new things that it's just like it looks exactly like some other superhero product that's been done maybe a ton of times. It's hard to get excited. It could be good. I'm not sure. But it's a tough competition there because you already got Spider-Mans and you already got so many great writers. And I mean, they got some of the greatest writers and artists working on these, and they kind of do subtle reinventations of some of the great classics. So, but yeah, when you got people who just think, like sometimes I was worried about calling it a comic book because I'm doing we're doing full rendered paints, like computer game concept art. Tyler Thaw, one of my artists, is into concept art, and his stuff looks like concept art for like Blade Runner or some cool video games, and that's what he's into. And I kind of was worried, like if I call this comic book, are people going to think it's just like they're just going to prejudge it? Maybe not people like you and I who know the industry, but friends and family who are outside of it, and you just don't want them to put a stigma on the whole industry. You can get any genre or any style or anything in comic books. And people still have this idea of comics as almost, they're obviously more mainstream, but you're talking about you combined art, who doesn't like art, and the art of writing. And if you get a good writer and you get a good artist and you combine it, comic books are brilliant. That's why there's so many movies now, because people are starting to see that.
And I agree. As a storytelling medium, it offers open-ended opportunities where you really can tell any kind of story because you don't have to have like a special effects budget and things like that. It's really open to your imagination, and you can do things a lot of times that aren't. I should say it's harder to do on the big screen and small screen. I don't know that that's true anymore because of the fact of CGI and everything. But I think what ends up happening is comics wind up being your idea central, where people are able to pull from these wonderful, rich ideas without any chains on them, because you aren't limited to this crazy budget that says, "Oh yeah, you've done a little too much CGI, Brian. Pull it back a bit, rein it in."
Yeah, that's a brilliant insight, because really the idea that you do have, like, a good filmmaker is handcuffed by certain politics, by certain budgets that, I mean, everybody has budgets, even comic guys, right? But if you, like, can you imagine trying to do a video of my first issue and the budget that would cost, to do digitally or just, live action, both? I mean, so I have none of that limitation. So yeah, I could just dig into what is the most sweet action sequence I can come up with or think about, and I don't got to worry about getting this actor to do that, or getting some kind of a prop or something, or camera angles. So yeah, but so comics, I think, they offer so much more.
And one of the things I do really love about this story, by the way, I haven't physically said that I love it, and I do, just so you know.
Thanks.
I loved how you guys integrated the actual physical story we're being told with the physical images. When you get that writing and the art team, you can tell it's not two separate people. They're working together. You can see just how the physical layouts of how, the lettering is laid out along with the pages, and just what I'm reading and what I'm action, everything's together kind of in a beautiful flow through where it's synergy, if you want to call it that way, or whatever terminology you want to use on this. You guys had a great interface between the story and the artwork, using both pieces, the written word and the physical artwork to tell this story. That was something I really deeply loved about this story, by the way.
Wow, that was a big obstacle, or at least concern. So I'm doing the lettering. I'm an artist, and so I have the ability to do the lettering. But working with Tyler, who was my main artist for the first 2 issues here. He is not into comics and doesn't have the experience in doing sequential art and storytelling. So I have in the preview issue like a page from beginning concept to the final render, and all the different variations of layouts. And pretty much every page we did, because I'm kind of picky for detail. I try to, obviously I let the artist be the artist, but at the same time, if something's not working for me, I'm also going to say something too. So you could see that we worked back and forth, and we both learned a lot. Like, it was more natural for me because I went to school for this, graphic and commercial art, but reading comics my whole life and whatnot. So, but it was a learning experience for both of us, and a page wasn't working, as you can see actually in a preview issue, that particular page, and some other pages where it was like, it's kind of cool and it was neat to sit there and I would take the stuff after, it would be like a layout one, and I just kind of move things around in Photoshop and that, and sometimes you even come up with something on accident. Like, in fact, a poster I was doing with a friend, I always wanted to do a poster of Spider-Man going one-on-one in basketball with someone. It's not part of my book per se, but I just wanted to do it. So I have Spider-Man going one-on-one, a poster of him playing basketball against Nightcrawler. And we were messing with just some little nuances in the layout, and I had 2 layers in Photoshop of Nightcrawler's teleporting poof. So there was just one where he poofed and then he was up on the rim. And I happened to just have 2 layers that I was moving things around, and I happened to just have both of his poofs on at the same time in different positions. And the idea came to me, well, wait a minute, what if he's like poof, poof, and then up on the rim, and it just makes the eye flow and you feel the movement of this basketball game. And so, like, stuff like that would happen all the time, and you would have this page that was like looking good, but there was just something not there right. Something's off, and you tweak, and then, I tend to be a perfectionist, and then bam, all of a sudden you do a couple little tweaks of an adjustment, and it just like, okay, now this really works. It flows and all that. But it was very nerve-wracking to see what kind of a response I would get, because it's kind of the first time really doing it, professionally and out the gate here.
I want to see that basketball game.
I know. Okay, well, I have it in a poster. You can see it on my website in the poster area and the store. And at the cons I have it up, and I would ask people just to get conversation going. You want to get a personal one-on-one, but I'd be like, okay, who would win, Nightcrawler or Spider-Man? Because Nightcrawler can teleport, but Spider-Man's got his Spidey senses. So I think it's like whoever gets the ball first. I don't know.
Well, yeah. See, I'd probably put my money on Parker, just because I think if he got in the groove of the game and was having fun, Spidey can do some pretty cool stuff. And, when he lets himself go and he stops, he doesn't focus on the craziness of his life and just lets himself have fun, he can do some amazing stuff. So,
one of the concerns I had was being Spider-Man's pretty much the flagship character compared to Nightcrawler, that I purposely designed it where, like, Nightcrawler is prominent in the picture, because I didn't want people to just assume Spider-Man would win. So I got Nightcrawler looking like he's got a little bit of an advantage in the poster, so because of that obstacle, which was another thing I came across as I was tweaking around with design, and I realized, wait a minute, if just from this angle, it puts a little more emphasis on Nightcrawler over Spider-Man, which I thought helped balance out Spider-Man's popularity. So
when I'm looking at
that's not part of like Staunch Ambition, but it's connected to the whole layout process.
Now, hang on a second here. In issue 3, I heard that the basketball game's taking place.
Maybe we will have. Maybe they'll have talking about their history. Maybe we can have them refer back to that classic duel between Spider-Man and Nightcrawler. That's what sports turned into in our future. That would be good.
The book had such a great plan that all of a sudden in issue 3 it got weird.
Yeah, everything changed when I did that podcast. Raging Bullets.
Yeah. You never should have talked to those guys. There's something wrong with them. You know, I do want to talk about the Jim was talking about the preview because it sets up the story premise, and I think the story premise is really cool. You know, I really liked how it set up the sun as what it is. It's this huge, powerful center of everything for us. And, you know, we take it for granted. You know, you get up every day and, you know, the sun's shining and all that, and it's a part of your day. But unless somebody really points it out to you what a powerful object that is and how it really feeds our ability to be here, it's staggering what a powerful object that's floating in space that we revolve around. So
awesome.
The great premise was, you know, you introduce this idea of this amazing power, and then all of a sudden a solar flare hits the Earth. And, you know, I'm a big fan of tech. I'm a tech junkie. I've been my whole life. I'm a comic fan. Right. I'm a tech junkie. I've always, since I was a kid, and Pong hit.
Pong was the beginning of it all.
You know, I've been into video games, home computers, you know, the whole shebang. I've always been interested in where tech's going.
Yeah, so tech is great.
Nowadays, we are entrenched in it. It's not that you have a computer or a game system. You have Apple TVs, you have phones, you have iPads, you have, you know, I mean, your watches, you know, I mean, tech's everywhere. We're linked. And it's actually so much more convenient than carrying around paper in most cases for organizing yourself. When this thing hit in the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, it really would wipe out everything. I mean, in the sense that your main infrastructures would be taken down, and it provides an open, free-run opportunity for the world to just launch into chaos, and people who would take advantage of that opportunity would leading into, you know, violence and wars and things like that, going back to our baser animal instincts, I think. And it was a very poignant way to start this off and make me go, wow, you can see why this pivotal event and surviving it would lead the world to come together and say, this cannot happen again. We need to not only set up a better world structure, but we need to set up some serious research over how this happened and what we can do to prevent that again. I loved that, and it's just in a few short pages, but so much depth to that setup that I was immediately, and everything I'm saying right now is not even in issue 1. I mean, which is impressive to me, to the concept, because there's a lot of depth there that just teases you right into, okay, I want to see what these people do. And it is a potential future you could look at for us and go, what if? And I really like stories like that where you can kind of take a look and go, this could happen today. A solar flare could hit and do this, and this would happen potentially. And I think it's an engaging concept because it fits a lot of the talk and dialogue that goes on now about, are we too tied into tech? And what do we do if all of this were to instantly get wiped out? I really like it because it's a contemporary, thought-provoking topic.
Awesome. Yeah, that I thought it would be good to add. You want to make building a sci-fi universe is a lot of work, as far as if you're going to try to really flesh out some, implications of what may happen and then how that would affect everything. And so that's one of the reasons that, I'm an artist, so I'm not a writer. I say this pretty much on every time I talk, is that, I was pretty intimidated about just coming in and writing a comic book on my own. So that was one of the other reasons I wanted to collaborate with a established, author or somebody who writes. I'm just horrible at grammar and spelling. I mean, I think I could tell stories and, art and, I have that kind of a passion, and this story is so intriguing to me. As you're saying, I have the same feelings. I'm like just so intrigued with the concepts that these things came to me, and I'm like, oh, wow, what would that lead to, and how would that happen, and what's their past like? So, and sci-fi is such an amazing vehicle to get into these concepts of who are we, philosophically, theologically, certain theological issues, and then, of course, history and science and all that stuff is so fun, and moral issues and moral dilemmas. And so another reason to have a co-writer for me is a million ideas. Like having Spider-Man and Nightcrawler going one-on-one in my story somewhere. Millions of crazy ideas from something crazy like that to just, I could do this, I could do that. And I have so many that it helps having a co-writer to just kind of plow up forward with, okay, I just threw all this stuff at you. What do you got? And then they come back with, something that is laid out, and I'm like so indecisive. Like, I got these precious characters that I'm afraid, like, well, if I go in this direction, I don't know if I'll be able to, do this part and that part and that. And it's like, it's so freeing when I throw a bunch of, just regurgitate all this stuff at my co-writer, and then, John McNichol would come back with his thing. And another thing that you said that reminded me of one of my favorite writers, G.K. Chesterton. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him, but this guy is brilliant. And he has great quotes, and one of his quotes is that we should be more amazed at the sun. I'm going to paraphrase it, but we should be more enamored or amazed at the sun itself than at the eclipse. This rare eclipse thing is cool. But the sun itself is the magnificent thing. And so he has a few examples that he gives to get across that point. But I think that's what I was trying to convey. I actually came across this quote after I wrote that preview issue, and I was a big fan of him before this. But so I was like, wow, what a great quote, because that's what I was trying to get at in my story. That double-page spread in issue 1 was supposed to be kind of that impact of the feel of, wow, the sun is a magnificent, kind of a feel. So,
yeah, I love the mother reference, and especially the mother reference you have throughout the preview, and as well as just the ongoing, reference, and they'll keep having towards the sun. It's not just the sun, it's the mother, it's life, it's just that pure focus of this is where all life comes from. This amazing entity. It's not just this is a living being as part of this story. It's kind of like whenever we read a really cool Batman story, it's because Gotham City is alive, or Metropolis is alive within Superman. Well, within this, the sun is a living entity as part of the story. And that's something that from preview throughout this first issue, I'm seeing this, and you're constantly seeing all these people reference to us. And this is something that I'm kind of looking forward to, what happens to the future, what happens in the future. And this is the kind of stuff that has me thinking off page on this series. And as soon as I start thinking off page on a book or on a series or anything like that, that's where I know, okay, I'm locked in into this universe now.
Awesome.
This universe has me in there, because I'm not just thinking the story you're telling me. I'm thinking of, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? And there's all these different stuff that, flying around there. I'm wondering about, wonder if they're going to do like a past story and tell us some more of this back stuff of this apocalyptic, initial uprisings and all this stuff, or the beginning of the company, or this, and there's all these different what ifs is going to, going through my head. And I think that for me always adds to an excitement on a series.
Awesome, man. I mean, that's humbling to hear, and I mean, that's so encouraging. So, yeah, I mean, if I had my way, I probably would attempt to tell every aspect of those stories.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're gonna, there's certain key points and plot, character developments and plot devices I want to get to. And there's certain ones I'm really married to, and there's some other ones that I'm like, okay, they're a little more moldable. And I have an overall epic story I want to get to. And so how it all actually resolves itself or unveils itself, there's plenty of content there to have some serious, development and some great cliffhangers. And we'll see if there's, how many pages. I don't know how many issues it's going to be, but we'll see if it's like I have a sub ending and then I do another, who knows how many issues, and then have another ending and then do an ultimate to tie it all together. We'll see how that all works.
Azaris am I pronouncing it right?
Azaris? Yeah,
Azaris, good. Azaris was interesting to me because you've got this 70% human and then, spliced life form. And what was interesting about him was you get into the reality of humanity where there are people who look at him as an abomination or a lesser life form because of how he was created. It's the whole, petri dish thing versus, being born. And it was interesting because I found myself feeling for him. And he reminds me a lot of what I like about in good sci-fi when you craft I don't want to, because he's not a robot, but he's a life form, which is really interesting about him to me. He has some of the things that I've loved about robots in classic sci-fi, where they're different than the humans. And they stand out as adding something to the story that's unique and different. But he's almost kind of my avenue, which I found strange. He was my avenue into this book. Like, I was seeing things more with him than I was some of the other cast, which I really liked. And when I say strange, I actually found this refreshing, because normally he's the character that I would be like, man, it's cool that he's there, but I'm hanging out with this other human. I wasn't in this case. I was riding along with him, and to see him, because his worldview is clearly so different. I think because it was a futuristic story, it was kind of fun for me to read. And I think this is a story you can read from a variety of different perspectives, depending on what you latch onto in the first issue. Sure. For me, it was him. I was immediately engaged by him. I wanted to know more. I still want to know more, which, is part of the point of the whole thing. And I could see this being a book where from issue to issue, because not knowing where issue 2 is going to go yet, right. I could see this being a book where maybe my perspective shifts depending on who I latch onto in that particular issue. And I find that fascinating about the universe, because I feel like there's a lot of different ways to look at the events that are happening based on the motivations and perspective of the characters. But I thought this was a very interesting character choice. I know, looking back at the original designs that are in the back of the book, that this was, obviously the most if I'm fair to say, it's the most long-standing character in this universe, the one that's probably been on the journey with you. How did he wind up being who he is? Where did that come from? Because I really like the concept a lot.
Well, yeah, the whole book is driven by ultimately by his story. I mean, he's a central character, and everything started with him. I mean, Azaris was the character from the Champions game I mentioned earlier, and the comic book cover I did in college, which we had a contest that I was pretty proud that comic book cover, even though there was some good ones, and I'm not sure I would have picked mine, I won first place. I was like, wow, so I really felt like I had something with this character and with that particular drawing. And yes, it was all about Azaris. And what I used to do at conventions is I would just go and take my versions of Azaris, and I'd go up to all these different artists and say, hey, I would love to get your take on this character. Anyone from Bill Sienkiewicz to all these just, more independent comic creators. And Trent Kanuga, he was like, Azaris started to develop, what it started out way back in the day was he was just a human being, got into an accident, and then, had this almost like superpowers kind of a thing, real generic. But that totally, everything changed, and little by little, pieces of Azaris started to come together, where I had Trent Kanuga, who worked on Ghost Rider and a few other things, and he was an independent creator. He did his version of it, and he just threw some pieces of stuff on him, and he was like, well, maybe, when he blew up, he parts of the spacesuit were molded onto him, and like that turned a whole other direction for this character, and that became part of the character. So a lot of the designs you'll see of Azarus is that there's this metal or technological stuff molded onto him, but kind of all broken and jaded or charred, and it becomes part of his body after you read in a story why that happens. But so everything was driven from Azarus as a character, and then instead of being human and turned into this superpowered something, it totally changed into a genetically engineered splice of a human and a animal with no sexual organs. And the concept was, well, they're making these kinds of worker clones in the future with a limited self-consciousness to do work, and they don't reproduce, and they don't want to colonize or whatnot, particularly because of the way they're made. So, it gets into so many intriguing issues of what I would like to do with Azarus is, what does it mean to be human, or what does it mean to be an animal, and what are the differences, or because I always say he as well with Azarus, but doesn't really have sexual organs, so it's kind of like one of these things, what does it mean to be male or female? And so some of those great concepts that you do get in a sci-fi, of course, coming into becoming self-aware is a huge one in sci-fi, and I'd be dealing with that as well. And then, yes, there's other characters that, like Riel, the main female character, that I just fell in love with her story, and we will be getting into some of this stuff with the backstories of Azarus and Riel. We're already writing it in issue 3 on. We're going to have a little bit of a fleshing out their personal stories. So I'm loving how issue 3 is starting out. So in the first 2 issues, you get to know the universe and everybody and the technology and these characters dealing with chaos. So you get like this introduction, kind of like the beginning of something like The Abyss, a movie or something.
I loved the space station and the concept of it, because I think when you're taking a look, or space, I guess it's a space station, right? I mean, I guess because it looks like a giant spacecraft of some sort.
Right, yeah, it's a space station. Yep. It's the design's based off of a jellyfish, actually.
Really?
Yes. It just kind of worked that way. Functionality. I mean, I wanted it to be based off of the jellyfish, but then it actually turned out to where it worked, to where it looked like a jellyfish's, coned head. But then I'm like, well, the sun's energy's hitting it and it's powering the station. But what if the trails of the energy coming off of the shield, that's the head, came off like tentacles? And originally it was like actual tentacles, for whatever reason to do something, and it turned into these like energy streams coming down looking like the tentacles of the jellyfish. So it's like that little tweak, just made it even, I think, just turned into this cool idea to just like, I can't wait to see it in a movie, kind of, or I wish,
The space program now has taken such a backseat. I mean, you hear more about it now. We're starting to, I think, hear some germination again of space programming, across the world. But it's something that really got put on the back burner because of just a shift in the focus of kind of our world right now.
Sure.
It was interesting to read this and go, well, you understand in this world, this future where this event happened, and it was so driven by what happened in space, how the world powers would come together, as they're crafting this new world of theirs, and say, well, we really have to go to the source. We need to know more about what happened to us, and how to prevent it, and what we can do to make our world a better place. Also to make sure that we never wind up getting hit with something like this again. I love the whole clean energy concept, but that for the people that are living in that world, there's so much of. I even liked when the guys were releasing the garbage into space, just to see the beauty of clean garbage. You know, being in. I just thought that there was so much of it where you're like, you get the concept of how what you find beautiful and entertaining and all of that would shift as where you live and how you live shifts. We know that historically. That part I liked just as much as we saw these big, huge events that were happening. We also got to see what recreation or downtime starts to look like. You know, even if it's passing time in that, because that to makes a world fully realized to me when we see those things. If you don't have them, it's one dimensional. This is a very much a 3-dimensional world for me, where I felt myself looking all the way around it and in it. Which was kind of neat.
Feeling like maybe you were visiting there, not stepping back and seeing it from a grand distance. That was one of the drives to put a scene like that, where it was like, I don't know what it's like for you guys to go to your job and to work, but that was the point. What would it be like if it was like that was your normal everyday job, that you're there? And what would be something that you can convey that to make us feel, all of us, as we're reading it, like we're there and we know what it's like to be there.
Yeah, exactly. And that was something that this really did bring forward for you, because the way you played this out, the way you laid this out, you didn't, we've got plenty of action sequences. We've got some really cool stuff that happens, but you didn't go bam, 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 and just start throwing all this stuff. You give us a nice flow, a nice just groove through the station. Then you introduce some people showing them at the window, and then the one guy being a jerk to, our main character, to the robot dude, or, Azarus, but just seeing how there's jerks in this world and there's okay people, but then it was a really cool. Again, it puts us in right there on the deck with them, puts us right there seeing this, and I think that for me was the reason that this was a really cool grab on and get you into the story and get you locked into this universe. So for me, that was something I really appreciated, how you took the time to let us learn about this universe, to learn about this station.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
No.
It's just nice to hear, because I remember putting this down and that was the intent, but not sure if it would come across. And man, it's nice to hear when that does work, because that's the, what I've been slaving over to do, that was the point of the story. So.
Oh, and it definitely hit, because as I said, I'm thinking off page. I'm thinking about those two guys. I'm thinking about other stuff they do on the station, and just various, as I said, once I start thinking off page, that for me is the notion, okay, this universe has me. And it's stuff like that where the creating team will take their time to tell us the full story of who these people are that makes it, more enjoyable. You need to have your action sequences, which you did, and you did some really cool stuff that we're going to talk about, I know, in a minute or so, because I really do want to talk about those. But, you need to have the real life versions. Like if going back to superhero comic books, Superman beating up an alien is awesome, but Clark Kent and Lois Lane hanging out with their son is absolutely wonderful. And you need to have those moments outside of the costume. And we have those moments outside of the costume when we're seeing life.
What are the best Superman stories? I mean, Superman could be easily made fun of. But when you get a writer who understands the character, you have a character with depth. I mean, when he loses his powers and becomes mortal or human, so-called, that whoever came up with that the first time tapped into something that made, oh wow, Superman, this changes everything. And so you have to have that balance. Yeah, you can't just have all this awesome action.
The sequence with Nimrod was completely interesting to me, because you've kind of crafted a world where you're like, okay, now we've gone from this wave destroying our tech to now we've rebuilt and we've got further advanced tech where we're, splicing together, DNA, and we're, making our own beings, and, we've got this really cool space station because the world powers have come together and said, we need to put funding into this because there's a need. And you see all of that, and like everything's beautiful. It looks great, and it makes sense that you would want to be a part of this and be involved. You start to see holes in that, though, which I really like. I like that because there's a reality to that maybe not everything is always what it seems. There's other sides to the whole picture in there that I find interesting. I'm still with the quote-unquote good guys. I'm totally with them, but I like when you start to see that there's more to the story. And when Nimrod hits and he's got this whole thing, the beginning crossed out, it's the end, and he's almost latching on to old tech and the old ways and things like that while being this eccentric sort of I guess genius that they got on the station that they're counting on. Really a mad scientist, so to speak, in what he's doing. I find him fascinating because we see what appears to be the end of his story until the cliffhanger where there is a construct of its own sitting there, and you're like, well, what does this mean? Because we saw him completely blow up, and then waiting there is this other thing. And I love that this is a story that the more it unfolds, the more I'm drawn into wanting answers and wanting to understand the world more. I found myself, I reread this book 4 times. And the reason why I did that is because there's a lot going on. And I think, to the point of who I was latching onto in my initial read through, and I pretty much stuck with him just because I find him fascinating. But to the point of our discussion here, there's so many other characters that you really want to get to know and what they're doing in their interactions. And I think if you don't latch onto them, you miss something. You miss a different avenue into this. I still feel there's more for me to tap into in this story, and I like that. And for me in comics, I find that my favorite creators are the ones that add this kind of multi-layered depth to a story. Jim and I talk about it on the show all the time.
Right.
It's the stories where the second read through you're like, oh my gosh, I missed so much. I really enjoyed the first journey, but wow, there's like all of these like DVD extras that I find along the way that really are like these hidden scenes that they seem like a throwaway at the time, but there's a lot more to them. And I feel this is one of those stories where I would encourage anybody listening to this who's already read issue 0 and 1 to go back through and make sure you're doing rereads of it because of the depth and content. And for anyone who hasn't picked it up yet, you're in for a fun ride because there's a lot here, and it's fascinating.
One thing I'll point out that's not even close to obvious, but maybe kind of is the... I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, it's that's the intent. It's that's the goal, is to try to write something that has a lot of depth and meaning, and like it's not something that's just kind of a cool one read concept, one trick pony, but something that you can, like Breaking Bad. I don't know, Breaking Bad I loved as a TV series, and it's just interconnectedness and all this intelligence put into these different characters and motivations, and or any great stories that do that. That's, I mean, I don't know how much I'll be able to accomplish that or continue that, but that's the goal every time. But there is details that we do try. Like there's things that I'm sure you guys probably didn't pick up. I'll say a couple things that you'll go back and look and you'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. In fact, I better double check if it's in issue 1 or 2, one of these concepts, because I don't want to say it if it's in issue 2. But I know the one that it's like a little subtle thing, but it was something that I wanted on purpose that maybe would come across subconsciously. But there's a double page spread with a spoiler here, but the double page spread, this whole sequence came to me one day I was driving. I just wanted to have something that would be cool, the aspect, and that's when Riel, the female character, asked to share the visuals through a holographic technology of the guys out, monitoring Nimrod, who comes in, ready to blow stuff up. And so she's like, share the visuals. And it just hit me one day, like, if you had that kind of technology, what if you were doing that when someone died? And so she's like, share the visuals. And so she witnesses this other character's death through his own eyes. And she's like just nose bleeding, taken aback. But what you might not have noticed is, and when you open that double page spread, on the left side of the page is the guy's body, and on the right side is his head. Mm-hmm. And I wanted it to split that way, so when you're opening it, it's like his head is visually just flying off of his body as you're opening the double page spread. But that's such a subtle little detail that it was important to me, but it's not something that I'm not sure you would pick up consciously. If I'm
looking at that page right now, and then she's like, my arm, but I just realized that because I saw his arm fly off, like, oh, okay. So I connected that she was thinking him, but I just realized this because his head is looking at the body. That is awesome, dude.
Right.
I like that, man.
No, and I didn't spoon feed it or try to like totally point it out, but I think that would that was the whole intention of, you got to kind of think about and read the story that you're reading, and not just because I do that. I'm guilty of it with comics. I've been reading comics my whole life, and I'll read 5 pages and I'll be like, did I really look at the art? And I have to go back and go, okay, let's look at it and just appreciate it for art, even. And so, you're just getting into the words, and it's like, yeah, that you look at the art, but you're not really like living at the art and finding it. And if it's good, it will pull you into this like visual media in your head. I mean, you'll just imagine live action.
Yeah, naturally, I read a book 3 times. I've got my read through, my art read through, and then one more read through after the art read through. So that's naturally. Now, when we're interviewing people, we'll read 4 or 5 times. And I'll tell you, I saw that scene multiple times, and every single time I was locked in my head that she knew about the arm because of the connection she had. It never dawned on me that she was physically looking at it through the guy's severed head. That is awesome. In a gruesome, horrific way, but still it's awesome.
She witnesses his death and his head flying off his body. I had the scene where it was dramatic, but I didn't have this visual connection where she's seeing and I'm like, what would drive this home? And I wasn't happy, and I had long drives at the time, and I think a couple of weeks I was driving and just kind of chewing on that sequence for a while, and then one day that hit me, and I said, oh my gosh, that's got to be it.
Of course, the classic usage of the Hindenburg, I love that. The fact that that's why Nimrod was created, this hot air balloon. I don't know how he created the blimp inside the space station, but the fact that he's using that and then had the images from the Hindenburg while he's doing his suicide run, that was really cool. Again, that was a nice story tie.
Yeah, I wanted to start the story with something like, what the frick is going on? And somebody like, so many great, stories do. I mean, they just start you out in the midst of stuff. And so, this Nimrod character kind of came about from that concept. Like, I need somebody to just start the ball rolling here. And I needed to start the story in the middle of him doing it. Of course, there's back content to fill in as to why it got to this point. But what would be weird, And actually, one of the influences that I was inspired by, now that I remember thinking about talking with you guys, it was the Joss Whedon run on Astonishing X-Men.
Oh yeah,
when they had these scenes, these meetings in the Danger Room. And he's brilliant. He does what I'm trying to do, which I think you guys are maybe saying I kind of getting across. But he puts in this idea, like little weird things were happening in the Danger Room. So they're like, there's a scene where they're sitting in the Danger Room, and there's all this holographic tech or whatever, and like Wolverine's sitting on a planet, and you think it's just like weird and all that, but they actually have this little subtle line that says, I don't know what's going on. The proportions on the Danger Room controls are just whacked out and something. And it's like just a little thing that's kind of adds fun to the story, but it turns out that's like a plot down the road where the Danger Room itself actually becomes their villain. And that was just setting it up, and I was just like, brilliant. So I kind of was like thinking with my technology and holographic technology and stuff, what would be weird and whatnot. And so, yeah, the blimp with the actual dynamite as opposed to, like some high tech kind of explosives. And
to me, I think it's important to do that in a story where you're using tech now, because growing up as a kid, I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I loved sci-fi movies, books, things like that. I mean, it always was a draw. It goes to that interest in tech. But even, if you look at things like James Bond films and things where they had, the tech and gadgets and all that kind of stuff.
So fun.
Yeah, really sweet. And Doctor Who and, all of my, I think television and pop culture experiences growing up really revolve around this kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
You're right, fun. And it's an interesting piece you've got to be able to try, and I think it's harder to do now, and I think it was really accomplished in this. You want the tech to be something where you're in awe of it, but at the same time, you want to, like, you latched in. I really like the way you were using older technology or older, artifacts mixed in with the new modern tech. I think it added this sense of comparison to naturally added more of a sense of awe and wonder to what was actually there. But I think retro nostalgia is something that does come back again. So it totally fit in this world again, fleshing it out and served as a great story vehicle at the same time too.
Yeah, I had read that somewhere that I was doing research on sci-fi building or world building, and one thing I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but it's like when you have new technology, in any age you have a mixture of ancient technology. I mean, we still have trains that transport our goods across our country.
Yeah.
Locomotion technology is old, and yet it's still utilized. I mean, if you look around your house and so someone made the point, well, there's just all kinds of variations of advanced technology to like stuff that's older. And so that was something that I tried to actually think about and have in the story. So I want to point out this other page because I looked it up and it is in issue 1. It's the second to last page when they walk into Nimrod's closet. If you look at that page, if you guys are able to look at that page,
mm-hmm.
There's a scene. There's 5 panels, I think, and so but there's like a bleed scene behind the 3 floating panels. The top bleed scene is 2 panels really, but they kind of have like a loose border. And one of the one top of those 2 scenes is showing that closet room from a perspective, and you see Riel in the doorway. And then you have the next scene of them in that same room, but they've walked in. But what you might not notice is there's a pipe of some sort coming from the floor in the one scene from the room, and it comes up to the forefront, goes down into the floor in a different area in that same scene, in that same room, I should say, in the other scene. So it's kind of like an MC Escher, and it's really subtle.
Oh, that's sweet.
I wanted to have something because it's kind of, they walk into this strange holographic, step into almost like the Twilight Zone kind of thing. So I wanted to have this kind of MC Escher weird visual there, but it's kind of subtle. So,
but see, I like that. I'll be honest, I didn't catch that.
Nobody's going to catch that. It's just there for fun for me, and I don't mind telling you about it, but. I don't expect people to be looking that detailed into it.
You know what though? I'm going to be honest. I think things like that, having done this podcast for as long as I have now, because we're heading on 11 years, I'm amazed when listeners will call in sometimes and point out something cool like that they've noticed that I didn't.
Yes.
I think it's fun to have those things in there. That they're called Easter eggs for a reason, and people do catch them. It's not your entire audience. It's going to be those. 1 or 2 people just happen to come across it. And then the nice part nowadays with social media and being online, that turns into an open dialogue where you kind of go, dude, did you see on such and such a page the pipe? I mean, it was, how cool was that? That sense of discovery and wonder, I think, is also something that's pretty inherent to comics because it's an artistic medium. So anytime you're dealing with an artistic medium, there's a chance to play around with it a bit and see what people do notice, to your point, right out of the starting gate, and what kind of things are kind of in the background that maybe 1 or 2 people are going to catch it, and maybe it'll go viral.
You would admit that when you looked at that scene, those two panels having that loose connection, but different areas in the room, you could tell subconsciously and just consciously that it was a strange area.
Yes.
That comes off. But the detail of that MC Escher kind of a thing is just a little subtle thing to add to it. So, I mean, but yeah, it is fun. That's why I love listening to, like, when I'm into a show or something, I love listening to other podcasts on it, because there's people now who will just break down the shirt color of these characters wear that, or they're using this color in this scene, or and I don't notice that kind of stuff sometimes. And then you hear these guys talk about it and you're like, oh, that's awesome.
And that does make it fun, because it becomes, again, I think we're in a really great area, as much as people talk about the negativity of the internet, and there's truth to some of that.
Sure.
There's also the immense positive of the interconnectivity and being able to have these shared experiences where, because of podcasts, because of forums, because of Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, we're so interconnected that thing before that maybe you would only notice if you were waiting in a convention line or somebody throws it out, or at a con panel, is now viral. And we all can gradually become a part of those type of things. I really enjoy that. It adds, I think, another layer to the sense of a community enjoyment of a book like this. That's part of the fun of comics now, is comics aren't this isolated medium that they used to be, where, you're this nerdy comic fan, which that was me growing up, still am. But the nice part is there's a larger community to draw off of now that you have, which is cool.
What's so exciting too is you might see, you read some great comic or watch some great movie or something, and I don't, that's the enjoyment. But what's, for me as a creator, or just being such a geek, or just loving art, I get maybe more enjoyment out of, well, how did they get to the point? Why did they decide to do it this way? And how did they figure this out? And I want to hear the details to, like, how they built this or made that or decided to draw it this way or that. And that's just as fascinating as enjoying the media for itself, in and of itself, in the beginning. So I eat up, like, the Lord of the Rings movies. I probably watched, I think I watched I got the extended versions and watched every minute of every behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's the extended versions, and I think when you start looking at those behind the scenes of films, I'm a big fan of that. One of the things I want to compliment on your 40-page version of this, I love the extras in the back. I'm a huge fan of that stuff. When they're put in there, that's another sense of, I get a glimpse behind the scenes. I do feel like when creators take the time to do that, I know it's an extra page count, but what I enjoy about it is I feel like the creative team's going out of their way to speak to me by doing this. It's like, great, you just enjoyed this experience. Now, here's some things that we want to talk to you about because we're friends, right? And let's have this conversation. Here's some great art that, concept art and things. It's a little bit of how we got there. Some things you may not have noticed about the characters. I love that kind of thing because I recognize there's a cost to putting that extra material in. But for me as a fan, I find that it adds this conversational nature to the relationship you have with the people that have created a book.
Yeah, I as we discussed, I just love it myself. So I'd love to share that, and I think it's definitely worth it. And then, this is a new independent book, so, people don't know, what is Staunch Ambition? So I think, for me especially, it's really, I think it helps because, I need to have a connection to my audience because I'm in the beginning stages of building and getting the word out and trying to tell people about it. So yeah, I'd love to share that too, though, because I just love it myself, and I'm not happy unless I hear or see the creative process of something I love too. So I'm glad you guys liked it because it's always a concern of what to put in, and I want people to feel. I'm trying to put a book out there that is as good as quality as you can get. And I'm competing with Marvel, DC, and all the great, big companies. So it's not easy, but that's what my aim is to try to put some content out there that people just love. So,
well, you can tell your passion for this project. You can see that in the work that's out there and what we're getting. And I think that's always, for me, again, another thing that when I'm reading a book and when I'm seeing it, and you can feel the love in the title. There's sometimes a creative team will go out there and they'll create, a really cool story, but it was a paycheck. And then there's other times when this is somebody's passion. And just from the story on the pages and from talking to you right now, you can really hear the passion. And I always like it when I know a creator has that passion and that drive for the story. This isn't just a story you're trying to tell or a book you're trying to sell. This is, you want people to experience this. And I think that for me has been, I'm like, man, it's got me more excited for issue 2 now. Now I'm like, and especially when I hear you talking about issue 3 you're working on, I'm like, all right, cool, let's keep this going. Let's keep the train going, man.
I'm so excited. The second I got issue 1 in my hand, printed out, it's here, I got it. I'm like, I want issue 2, that second, or minute. I was just like happy with issue 1, but I'm like, I want issue 2 in my hand. So 3 is also the same scenario. But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm a fan as well, and I'm very passionate about this. I'm just, I wouldn't be working my butt off on it and not, I got to feel like it's worth the while. I don't want to kind of do it and then it just kind of be a little disappointed, man. It's a lot of work. So I'm really trying to make sure I do it right. And I'm not saying I'm doing everything right. I make certain mistakes, but I want to be proud of it. And the team that I'm working with is amazing, and I am proud. I am very proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. So,
is there anything? One of the things that I really enjoy about this book is the production values, and I'm noticing this more and more now with independent comics that we're seeing creators go out of their way to do a little bit of a better page quality, or I love the painted style. You mentioned the painted rendering of this. It's a very beautiful book. It feels like something special. How do you what process did you go through to kind of make the decision as far as we're going to use this kind of cardstock, we're going to use this kind of paper quality? What does that look like? Because as you mentioned earlier, you're coming at it from I'm an artist and I'm looking to craft comics because that's kind of where my wheelhouse is. So you got into the whole production side of it. How did that come about? Because honestly, I appreciated you hold this book in your hand. It feels like something special right away. There's a different quality to it. I'm noticing some of my favorite published comics now. They're the ones that are, because you're not getting this from your big two. You're getting this really more in more of an independent market. And some of my favorite independent publishers are doing this type of thing. And it does feel like something different because of it. I appreciate it.
There was a lot of variation, like directions it could have went when I was looking for an artist to collaborate with. Because I'm an artist, but I'm a slow kind of like just a one-piece artist or colorist and letterer and I'm not a layout artist. I don't just sit there and draw stuff out of the top of my head. So, to do this kind of a project, I would not be able to do. But I can, I'm very creative in so many other ways. So to find the right artist was pretty much, I just put stuff out online and this and that. And, I wasn't willing at the time when everything changed from this, when I was young in college, to this more realistic sci-fi that was so compelling to me. It really did change to where I was open to going with the traditional kind of a comic book look, but really I'm a big Bill Sienkiewicz fan. And that guy, I think he introduced fine art to mainstream comics. I mean, working with Frank Miller and doing stuff on the New Mutants that no one had ever seen. Fine art looking stuff, not your traditional superhero comic book drawing, which looks amazing too. But at the same time, I love this sci-fi. I think it can be done with a traditional look, but I think it just added more to find an artist that. And I came across Tyler Thaw through Facebook, some group, and it just started to fall into place. And I think one of the reasons is that I did that one version of Azarus with a very serious style on the preview issue where he's looking at the Earth. With a very Prismacolor pencils, and then they finish it in Photoshop, and it's a very painterly Prismacolor pencils. You can get a very painterly look from it, almost like airbrushed, very detailed and layered. So that was, I think, the thing that sold it to maybe like someone like Freddie Williams or Koi Pham, is when they looked at this project before I actually had a ton of stuff. And then Tyler Thaw, they're like, wow, this is interesting. This is something, because my style is a certain way, that I might actually be interested in. So maybe from my first initial version of Azarus that I drew, that you can see online or in the preview issue cover. But because I was starting out, I was kind of desperate to find an artist, and it could have easily had went to a more traditional look. But I was fortunate to find someone like Tyler Thaw, and then he just set the ball rolling in this direction. So,
guys, is there anything we've covered a lot on the book? Is there anything that we haven't covered about the story elements of the book, or anything that we've left out? Because I really don't want to miss anything. I'm greatly drawn into this universe and this world. Is there anything off of issue 0 or 1 that we did not discuss?
Well, I like the concept of life brings science, science gives truth, truth is force, force creates virtue. I love that little, how you guys did that little message inside Nimrod's little holographic closet, just to, again, give you a little notion on what this guy is, what his mindset is. It was a really cool, just, put there kind of his philosophy, credo, whatnot, that you're going to talk about the guy. That, again, that was one of those things where, okay, this guy's a little bit touched in the head.
Yeah, and actually that is an important point, because we haven't talked about this. One of the implications, huge implications of this story, one of my taglines is, welcome to the new enlightenment. So we had the first enlightenment, science and technology, and as that advances, mankind enters into, or humankind I should say, enters into the supernatural. So that's kind of one of the big overall arching, story arcs of what is the implication of mankind entering into the supernatural, with not just entering into it, but with high tech, advanced technology, and so thus the new enlightenment. And that's what that's kind of getting at. You got this kind of a connection between the scientific laws of science with this kind of a maybe ethics or moral compass, or moral ethics. So I kind of am playing with that idea, how things are connected by a physical reality to moral reality.
It kind of seemed to me have like a religious type feel, because when I was reading that, I was thinking, okay, is this the underlying doctrine of some new quote unquote religious philosophy that's going to be a science based? And as I said, I kept thinking started going off page, and I was wondering is that him? Is that his words, or is that somebody he's getting that from? Are we going to be? Is this the beginning introduction of a new character, or what? I was like, man, where's this from?
Cool. Yeah, I came up with that, and I put a bit of thought into it, and and I still don't have that all ironed out, but it's definitely intrigues me, at least, and so we'll see where it goes with that. But it's kind of core to how I think, and some of the things I want to play with in this universe. So.
Oh no, it was a great. As I say, it's a great. Especially that leads into the big reveal at the end that Nimrod blew himself up, but he also made his own clone. So inside this holographic closet, that this guy that nobody knew existed, on top of being able to build this giant blimp, he was able to clone himself inside this station. Then they had no idea that was coming. And for me, those were some really cool stuff. Just bam, 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 right at the ending, hit you with the hammer. Cool.
Yeah. In fact, the issue, in another behind the scenes, issue 1 was I was going to try to, audaciously come out with a double-sized first issue, and I'm independent and all that, and it's just it was so much to try to do because I just hadn't built the capacity to do that yet. I was talking to another comic creator of John from Iron Age Comics, who him and I have done some cross promoting, and he was like, you should just split this first issue, double-sized first issue, into 2 issues. And, because you're just killing yourself trying to do it. And it's even, that alleviated a bit. But yes, he was right. I I was saw like I just have big ideas, you know. Everything I researched on doing my first independent book was do a small story first and this short story and this, and I'm like, but I'm doing this because this story is what I want to do, not because I want to do just an independent. I mean, I love comics and art and I want to do that, but this story I want to do. So it's like I'm like coming out trying to do this epic story. I'm going to do everything big, and I'm like, I just can't do a double-sized first issue. So what I wound up doing was splitting the first double-sized issue into two and then adding some story there that to kind of put a little bit more detail into what a few scenes that I wanted to add in there. And so that's what I wound up doing.
Are there cutscenes? Like, what I mean is, you hear all the time about in television and movies, I mentioned DVD extras earlier. It's funny.
Sure.
It's funny calling them DVD extras now because really who's buying DVDs anymore? But I really,
it's like an album just came out.
Yeah, exactly. And I still call them albums too. But I think one of the things I really enjoy about them is sometimes seeing the scenes that didn't make it. And sometimes there's scenes that you're like, oh man, I wish they did wind up in there because they added something. And other ones you're like, well, it's great. I'm glad. I like to see it from an interested standpoint of seeing that, what that story element would have been. But you recognize from a pacing standpoint why they cut it out. Were there things that you wanted to do in this first issue that you had to cut? You're like, I want to do this, but we just really judiciously, due to page count or something like that, have to cut back, and we can't head down this avenue.
Yeah, the double-sized issue was one of them. And the first thing that comes to my mind, because it's fresh, is the cover to issue 2. So working with Erwin Arosa, who's a magnificent artist, I wanted to do for Kickstarter. I feel like the genius in what you were getting at earlier with Kickstarter is you are, collaborating, and you are buying something that you're not going to get anywhere else. And it's got that appeal, and it's got that innovative indie feel. And, why should just all the big established companies be producing everything when you have, like, some of the greatest inventions come from independent, people, minds? So you want to offer something in your Kickstarter that you can't get anywhere else. So doing a variant cover for issue 2, I had Erwin Arosa do it, and he is amazing. But what he did was he went out and he did a layout that I says, oh, okay, he did some layouts, and then I was like, well, this is a good one. Let's go with this concept here. And he just went to, and I says, I always tell him, don't send me anything finalized because I'm kind of a picky, and I don't want to, change stuff that you did, put a lot of work in. Well, he came back with this amazing detail, and I can probably reveal this one day, of, a lot done for this variant cover. And I was like, no, we got to change it. And I felt so bad. And the poor guy, his expression looks like, when I told him that, his expression looks like the actual variant cover of the guy on the cover. I think he took a picture of himself. And if you look at the variant cover, you'll see like what his expression was. But now when you look back on some of these, like when you look back on, I'm like, yeah, I know, but don't send me stuff too finalized because I might want to tweak it or something. And it was worth tweaking and changing. But at the same time, yeah, there's a lot of sometimes there's stuff like that going on. But is there stuff that I wanted to do that I couldn't? Well, yeah, there's a lot of that, especially when you're on tight constraint. But like, I'll tell you, this is a big one. Wow. Okay, so this is right to your question. This is what you're looking for. Bill Sienkiewicz. You guys are familiar with him, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, people have trouble with his pronunciation, so people might not understand who I'm talking about. But Bill Sienkiewicz, amazing. He's probably my favorite artist. Well, he did a sketch for me of Azarus. He was at Motor City Comic Con, and then I did a digital. I scanned it in and did some coloring for it. You can see it online, but I started to talk to him and show him my stuff. Obviously, he drew my one character, his version of it, and he was going to do my cover to issue 1. And I guess I won't get into the actual numbers, but the guy is worth every penny. He wanted thousands of dollars, and I have the budget, as we were talking about earlier, and doing the numbers. And I was like, I could have Bill Sienkiewicz do my cover. I am going to die. But I'm like, how can I get this to work with the money? And I started to think about it. I'm like, well, I could pay him, and then I have the original, and if I need the money, I could just sell it. I could sell the original. Oh, I come to find out that the price he gave me was just the printing rights. He would have the original still. And I went online, and he would sell that for another thousands of dollars. If you go look at his website, you'll see that his stuff is worth thousands of dollars he sells it for. And so I had to say no, I couldn't do it, even though he agreed he would do it. So that was the most crushing decision that I had to make. And so, because I would have more than anything loved to have Bill Sienkiewicz do my cover. If anybody just looks up his art, the guy is the master. He's a master.
Even though to have that experience where you were in a position where you're like, you know what, this is something I can at least pursue. That's a cool story in and of itself. I mean, not many people get that opportunity to say, I'm able to approach him. It's a deal that's potentially in the works. When in your lifetime do you think you're going to get that opportunity? That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I because I met him personally at the con, that was what worked for it. But I had sent to Barry Windsor Smith. I had sent to, these guys, Arthur Adams. I had submitted stuff. Hey, and I'm looking, and then, and I submitted to a bunch of people. And then, Freddie and Koi Pham, who are amazing artists, came on board. And they weren't like, killing me with their prices compared to like what a Bill Sienkiewicz wanted. But Bill Sienkiewicz, of course, is worth it. So I just couldn't fit in my budget. But it was stressful. I was like, everything told me I wanted to have him do my cover so much. I just was so worried about I'm going to deplete my expenses so much there that it's going to ruin the quality of the book,
It honestly, sometimes things happen for a reason, and they wind up making for a better product in the long run. Kind of going through that whole journey and kind of figuring out the balance. Those are things that I think are interesting when you talk to creative types like yourself who've accomplished it. You've got your book out. It's the journey, because everybody's journey's different. It can't help but be it, because it's your first go around at it. So really trying to make this happen and do it right to your vision for what you want in people's hands. I'm always amazed and congratulate you when people are able to get from I don't want to say to A to B, because it's from the A to Z of the process of completing a project like this, because there's so many steps and hurdles along the way that could cause you to jump ship on it. And to the detriment, I think, to potential fans, because of the creative idea that we all lose. I really was impressed by this, and I'm so glad we had the opportunity to get you on to talk to you about this.
Awesome.
I do want to shout out to our listening audience about the Kickstarter for issue 2. If you were on board with us the first time around we were promoting this, you've already got it and you've been enjoying it. But if you didn't, I mentioned earlier, this is one of the things that I really love about this Kickstarter is there are tiers on this one, very easy to jump on tiers, where you can get the whole shebang, the whole Staunch Ambition experience from this. I love Kickstarters that offer you, whether you've been a reader or you're a new reader to it, the opportunity to jump on board very quickly. The Kickstarter for issue 2's up. Is there anything, Brian, you want to tell us about it? Because I know you said we're about 40% in at this point. What do you want to tell? What can you tell us about the Kickstarter right now? Let's get people excited about being a part of Staunch Ambition.
Oh, that's cool. Freddie Williams just got back to me and said that I asked him if I could tag him in a post to share the to get this Kickstarter toward the end, to end well. And he's like, feel free to tag me in the post. So what a good guy. He's been great. The Kickstarter has exclusives, is one of the biggest things. So not only do I have variant cover exclusives for the Kickstarter, issue 1, I did that prologue with the first issue combined with a variant exclusive numbered Kickstarter. And I have a few of those left. So you can only get these exclusive variant covers that are numbered. So there was only 100 printed of that first issue, and I have like 26 left. At least I had 26 left. I have certain backers who have already picked up some of those 26, but there's still some of those left, and those are going, and no one will be able to get them outside of Kickstarter. And then I have an exclusive numbered issue number 2 as well, variant cover. I have some early bird specials, and I have T-shirts, and I have some prints, and then I have a handful of signed copies of issue 1 by Freddie Williams, signed by Freddie Williams. I have pictures of Freddie signing them. He was gracious enough I asked if he would sign them, and he was like, yeah, send them to me, and he took pictures. And then I asked him after he got them, like, hey, can you take some pictures? And so he's been awesome. He took pictures of them all next to each other. And then I got Koi Pham to sign 30 copies of the preview issue, which he did the cover for. So, and these guys are just working for all of the big companies. So Koi Pham now working for DC as well. So the Kickstarter is the only way that I can continue to do this. I have my day job, and I have 5 kids, and this is my independent project, and I'm not going through a publisher. I couldn't crank these books out quick enough to go through a publishing company. So unless I can become successful and quit my day job, then I would. But so the Kickstarter is crucial for independent book, and so you'll get exclusives, and even just the basic standard issues I think are just gorgeous. So at least check it out and share it, and don't miss out on something that you can only get through Kickstarter.
Yeah, I'm a big fan too and I'm doing this more and more with Kickstarters. Usually when I see a Kickstarter that I'm interested in, I'll jump on it initially, and I'll grab one of the lower tiers just to get my foot in the door. So I remember to. Because if I don't do that then, what ends up happening is it's, usually there are a 30-day period. The 30-day period passes and I miss it. I'm not on board. So I do that right away. What I'm doing more and more now is I go back and spend and pay a lot more attention to the other tiers that are available for some of those cool extras, especially if it's one that I'm highly interested in. That's where I end up getting, we're comic fans, right? We're all into swag. It's anytime you get the collectibles, the swag, and something that feels like it's just yours, because it was distributed to only such a small amount of people, adds a different sort of layer and connection to the experience. So I'm a big fan of that. So definitely check out the Kickstarter. And if you already have supported it, go back and check out some of those tiers, because I do that now when I didn't do it before. And I found, where I found it was at a convention line. I was a friend of mine had a shirt on for a Kickstarter I supported, and I didn't even know this was a thing. And we were sitting there and chatting, and I'm like, where'd you get that? He's like, dude, it was on the Kickstarter.
You're like, I want it. and you bought it from him right there, right?
Yeah. Well, he was wearing it, so I wouldn't. And when you're in a convention line, it was a cool looking shirt, but after he's been wearing it in a convention line, we all know that convention smell.
Yeah,
it's. Oh man, it was sweet looking, but it's his.
It didn't smell so nice, but it looked great. My shirts are scented, so
Oh, there you go.
Scratch and sniff. No, another important thing about the Kickstarter is it's 13 days left, so we're halfway through. Just a little bit beyond halfway through. So we've had a decent start. It's has a little bit of a lull, but 13 days to support and continue and to get exclusives. So,
and there are links to the Kickstarter in the show notes. There will be links to the Staunch Ambition website. Is there anything else that you want us to put links to in there to let people know how to get in touch with you?
I suppose the Kickstarter website and Facebook and Twitter are the main avenues, and if there's links on my website to the back and forth. I mean, it's all interconnected. Sure. Simply typing in Staunch Ambition in Google, But the most important thing right now is the Kickstarter, and I have links obviously all over the place for that. So.
I encourage people in the community too, and I do this a lot. We all have different tastes, and maybe you're not a sci-fi fan, but you have friends of yours that are. Like, I bought copies of this now for a couple friends of mine because I want them to read it. if you have friends who are fans of sci-fi, whether you are or not yourself, this type of thing needs to be viral. And it's really important for you to tweet it out, shout it out, send an email to somebody, say, hey, look, this may be flying under your radar, but this is really cool and you're going to want to check it out. Let people know about it, because these projects are only successful when they go viral and when we as a community do our part to share it. So please make sure you're getting the word out. Even if you only pick up, in your mind, one or two people, there's still one or two more people that are now jumping on board and they're a part of the Kickstarter. So really, everybody listening to this is important, and you're part of the community getting this book out there. So please shout this out. Let your friends know. Every single person that jumps on board really helps this, so please make sure to jump on and go ahead and do that. Whether you are a sci-fi fan or not, that's where a community is really important to support. Somebody who's obviously, Brian, you've given us a lot of time today, and you're supporting us, so we want to support you. I love this book. I want issue 2. I want issue 3. I want to see where this story's going, because you got me hooked.
Awesome, man. I'm honored, extremely honored.
All right, guys.
Really.
Well, Brian, as I said, thank you very much again for joining us. And honestly, I'd love to follow up on this with issue 2. So hopefully in the future we can have you come on board, and we can get all spoilery with issue 2 and hopefully be teasing issue 3.
Right. So I'm excited to see how issue 2 hits you, and then look, I'm hoping things will continue to grow, and this Kickstarter will be successful. Then we'll be able to do that. So
that's great. Well, thank you.
Would love it. All right, thanks for having me, guys, and it was great talking to you.
Holy caffeine!
I do want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. Right now, we don't currently have a voicemail message on there. I have a Mac now. I had a PC before when we first put the voicemail recording on there. And I'm not sure on Skype for Mac how to put the voicemail recording back on. I'm going to figure it out. Don't worry. I will put the message back. My point is, if you're calling into the show voicemail line, we do get your messages. We are going to be having them on the next episode. The only reason why they aren't on this one is because we did this recording with Brian, this segment with Brian, and Jim is not here at the moment, so I'm just recording a quick intro and outro to it, just so you guys have that. So we will be having our voicemails back, and we do want you on the show. So please know that anybody who's called in, your voicemails are going to be on the podcast. I air all of them. The only time haven't aired a voicemail is if something wound up where the file was corrupt, which occasionally happens in Skype. In 11 years, it's happened about 3 times. So just so you know, we get 90%, 95% of the messages. So don't think that we've forgotten about you. I want to remind everyone about our website, ragingbullets.com. We're actually hitting over the threshold of year 11 right now. It's going to be in between the release of this episode and the next episode. So I want to thank everyone for supporting us. We are going to have a celebration coming up, not just for year 11, but episode 500. And seeing as we're so close to that, we're 9 episodes away, we're going to save our big celebration episode for 500. So we're on the road. We're getting there. We're going back to 500. A lot of the things that have been adding to my workload, I mentioned I'm going through my principal licensure and things like that, are going to be easing up over the next couple of months. So the show's going to get back on a regular schedule. We've been doing about 3 episodes a month right now. I'd like to get us back to at least 4 episodes a month, which is what we've traditionally run. So thank you for your patience with us right now. We're still here. We're not going anywhere. We love the podcast and we love you. So just give me a couple more months to get myself back on track, but expect content during that time as well as we head into 500 episodes of Raging Bullets, and we really do appreciate you being here for us. RagingBullets.com is where you're going to find news on what's going on with the show. We do have a Twitter account, a Facebook group that is shared with the InfiniteComics.com website. We really love the Facebook group community, and it's really become, I've mentioned it before many times on the show, and I genuinely mean this. This is a group that grew out into itself and made its own thing, and I'm just proud to be associated with all of you. So thank you for everyone in the group. If you haven't joined the Facebook group, consider hanging out there. It's one of the best chat audiences you can possibly be a part of. The people that run it really make a fun, positive geek culture area to hang out and talk about all comics. It's not just DC. They talk about everything. They talk about the current shows, movies, video games, blogs, podcasts that are out there. It's an open forum and community. If you have something you want to promote and you're part of the community, please go and promote it. People have asked me that very kindly before. We have no restrictions on that. I consider that to be an open community. It's about all of us hanging out together, supporting each other on anything that we're doing. So please use that to promote anything that you think would be of value to all of our friends over there. And it's really just a great group to be a part of. We are on Google+. I have a PlayStation account, which is Raging_Bullets. I have a Nintendo account, actually, which is drnorge, Dr. Norge. So please feel free to add me on any of those as well. I love hanging out. I'm currently playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a mind-blowingly cool game. I'm playing Horizon on the PlayStation right now, so it's there's been some great games out there for the gaming audience. So if you're in those, please add me as a friend, and I would love to see what you guys are doing as well. We are supported, as always, by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I mentioned the bundles. They have 5 bundles that are 50% off, these Rebirth bundles. I love the bundles. I know Jim shouts them out all the time on the show because they're a great way to save money. Right now, we all are comic fans, and you're trying to keep up with the increased number of titles. 50% off gives you a chance when you're trying out a new line or, new additions to the line to really be able to get them on a budget and to see what books you want to keep. And I really appreciate that DCBService.com, when you're pre-ordering months in advance, gives you the opportunity to continue ordering at that 50% off discount as you try out these books. So they also have a variant edition bundle, which is great for those of you that like to collect variant covers. Jim and I are big fans of those as well. The great way to get the variant covers, all at a discounted price. So thank you, DCBService.com. And actually, that variant edition bundle, just to make a correction there, that one's 45% off. The rest of the bundles are 50% off, so I do want to correct that. 102.31, you get every variant cover, all 54 DC Rebirth variant bundles. So you want to take a look at that's really cool to get the variant edition comic covers. I'm a fan of those. Jim and I have both been collecting them. So thank you, DCBService.com, for providing those. Over at InStockTrades.com, I mentioned the deals of the week, but I also want to mention some of the latest releases, like Batman by Brian K. Vaughan, trade paperback. 45% off, only $9.34. The Flintstones trade paperback. This is the brand new edition of Flintstones that they have been doing. That's Volume 1 is 45% off, only $9.34. InStockTrades.com is the place to go if you've been missing books that have been coming out. It's a great way to catch up on them at a discount. So thank you, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, for continuing to support our show. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be jumping right back into DC Comics, one of the book series we're going to be talking about both Green Lantern titles. We have actually quite a bit of content we want to talk about on that episode, so we will see everyone next week.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plot line, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.